Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 1st of November, 2017. Would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, Mr. Villalobos. Would you start us off with the roll call, please, and TV coverage announcement?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County and Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on CSB TV's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Now for the roll call, Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner St. John.
Here.
Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
And Chair Cooney.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have next our agenda status report and projection report. So could you do that, please, Mr. Wilson?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. We have 3 items on the standard agenda. There's the SoCal Gas is coming back with the revised project description. There's a property line adjustment and also an appeal of a land use permit. Staff is ready and prepared to present all those items today to your commission. And if you'd like, I can move on to the projection report.
Please.
At our next hearing, which is on November 8th in Santa Maria, we have the Old Town Orchid parking lot use determination coming before you for your review and action. In addition, the joint meeting with the AAC has been scheduled for that hearing date as well, and those topics that we've discussed previously will be on that agenda. The next hearing will be on December 6th. There are a number of items on that. The cannabis land use ordinance amendments will come back before you. Verizon in the revised location will be brought back to you at that hearing, as well as 2 subdivisions, Abbott Tract Map and the Zakara Ranch development plan and employee dwelling, and an appeal of a emergency permit will be on that. Zakara Ranch isn't a subdivision, that's just a development plan. I correct myself on that one. And then the guidelines for determining significance for cultural resources is on that agenda as well. And then the next hearing will be December 13th. There's also a number of items on that day. That's where there's 2 subdivisions. Oak Hills Estates, as well as Key Site 3 is on that hearing date. Bell Street mixed use, there's an ordinance amendment and a tentative tract map and development plan. And then we also have the guidelines for determining significance for the cultural resources also on that hearing date. And then we'd like to ask the Chair and the Commission today to set a special hearing for December 20th, which is the joint hearing with Montecito Planning Commission for the Coastal Resiliency LCP amendment, the joint workshop on that one, and also for the accessory dwelling unit ordinance amendments at a joint hearing with the Montecito Planning Commission on December 20th. And then moving into the following year, which is January, we will come back on January 10th with the Lompoc Stone Vesting Determination Project, as well as we have the cannabis scheduled on that hearing date, and then the next one would be January 31st. I know at the last hearing we did talk about using January 17th as another date to hear cannabis in South County, or?
Go ahead.
Thank you. You know, when we had that discussion, we talked about the 24th of January. And I know at last meeting, I believe that was Commissioner Blau said that we could always continue the hearing, the January 10th hearing to another date. But I'm just wondering if we couldn't set aside sort of that January 24th date. Looks like there's five Mondays in the month. And just think about that. if that works for staff.
So Chair and Commissioner Brown, we can look at that and then bring it back at the next hearing on that, for that date.
Okay.
Good, yes, we meet next week, so we can
Yeah.
update our thinking as
Yeah.
to the right date. We do want Commissioner Brown present if possible.
And can I just ask a question on, let me see, on our December 6th hearing for cannabis? Could we do it, I don't know, you've got it listed first. I don't know what your plans are for where in the agenda it will be, but I'm thinking if it's first, then people know that it's shortly after 9 o'clock. Is that the intent, is to have it first? Because I'm just concerned about having sort of a certainty about the time, about when it might be heard, so people can come if they want to do that.
Mr. Wilson?
So Chair Kuehn and Commissioner Brown, that's just a placeholder on that
Right.
specific date. I think staff would like to go back and look at these other projects. It might actually make more sense to move it towards the end of the agenda
Okay.
and take care of some of these other items on the agenda.
Okay.
So that way we could do, if we want to do a time certain, we could do that maybe
Yeah.
after lunch.
Yeah, could we,
Depending on how these other items go.
if the commission desires to do a time certain, just so you'd have the community would have some knowledge about when to show, because I expect that we may have a few people for that.
All right, Mr. Wilson, you'll take care of that
Thank
to establish time certain for the
Thank you.
10th. Other questions from commissioners on the projection report? Mr. Wilson, ready to go? You want to do some more?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I want to go through all of next year. No, just a reminder for that December 20th date.
Correct.
To set
Correct. We'll take that up if there are no other questions. All right, Commissioners, so we're asked to set a special meeting, a joint meeting with the Montecito Planning Commission on the 20th of December. Can we have a motion to that effect?
Yes,
Commissioner
sir, I
Brown?
would like to set a special hearing date with the Montecito Planning Commission for December 20th.
Commissioner St. John,
I'll second the motion. I'm still a tentative because I have a potential schedule conflict that day, but I'll still second the motion because I think you should go ahead with or without me.
All right, great. So we have a roll call vote on the motion.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner St. John.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to public comment. This is the time we reserve on our agenda each meeting for members of the public to address the commission on matters not on today's agenda. We don't have any speaker slips, I take it, for public comment. No one in the room has public comment. Anybody in Santa Maria? Commissioner Blau?
No, there's not, but I need to back up if I could just 1 second. I did want to comment on the projection, and that is, I noticed we have one item for January 31st. I wouldn't mind if we move that to the 24th, and then if we need to continue the canvass the 24th, but I don't see the need to meet the 24th and then again the following week for a 1-hour hearing. So if staff could take a look at the Boulders lot appeal to see if it could be moved up to the 24th, that'd be, I think, financially responsible to do that.
Mr. Wilson, will you give that some consideration among the other matters you're taking into account? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Blau. Any further comments before we return to public comment? It doesn't look like we have any public comments, so we will move to informational reports from planning commissioners. Anything from Commissioners Blau or Farini?
No, sir, we're good to go.
Okay, then. Let's turn to Dr. Russell for his report, which sounds like he's been in court.
Yes, I have. I'll talk about that. So there have been a series of hearings in October since your last meeting. On the 3rd of, oh, by the way, good morning, commissioners. there was a set hearing for Article 10, which I will get to, and short-term rentals were heard on the 3rd. And the board had given us a direction back on June 6th, and without getting into all the details, basically they did not allow full house short-term rentals in any residential zones except for an overlay area in the coastal zone around the Miramar. They allowed homestays, that is renting a room or 2 or 3, in residential and Ag 1. Short-term rentals, full house rentals are allowed where hotels are allowed, but that's fairly limited. So that was basically what they did in Ag 2. They want to allow farm stays similar to what there is in the Gaviota plan, but because that's something new as opposed to short-term rentals, which are an existing allowed use, they pulled that out and put it into the ag-tiered permitting project because it required a little bit more CEQA review than the rest of it did. We really couldn't do that on an exemption. So that's basically done. On the 10th, there was an approval, delegation of authority to me to allow for the creation of a joint review panel for the Plains pipeline environmental review. The Plains has applied to replace the entire pipeline all the way to Kern County, all the way to SLO, and so that's going to be 3 counties, the Forest Service, and BLM in a massive environmental review, and we have the lead. So we used to set up these joint review panels administratively at the department level without any direction from the board, but due to a case a couple years ago that wasn't specifically about joint review panels, but it was in general about the delegation of authority by boards of supervisors, it was necessary to go to the board and ask them to delegate that authority, which they did. We let the Hoop House EIR contract to Recon, so that's moving forward. And interestingly, we had wasn't a planning and development item, but there was a 5-year forecast that was really the debut, as it were, of something called Renew 2022. If you look at all of the commitments of general fund that have been made over the years to maintenance, to the North County Jail, to the property tax shift for fire, with then the addition of the reduction in the assumed rate of return on the retirement fund, we now see that our costs are going to exceed our projected revenues, very likely, to the tune of, over the next 5 years, it will increase to about $40–50 million a year. So this Renew 2022 is basically a effort to completely restructure county government, is basically how I would put it. So the way that the county provides services is going to change significantly. I've been involved in some of the activities and looking at ways to save money for planning and development. Because we are like 2/3 permit revenue driven, that's a good thing because it's not, that won't drop off. It's going to be the general fund. They're going to give us less general fund as our costs increase. So cumulatively over the next 5 years, we'll see a reduction in general fund each year, but in total, it'll be about $660,000. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at, but in the 2010-11 budget, I lost $2.4 million in one fell swoop. So this does not bother me greatly. We will be able to adapt. But if you look at departments that are largely general fund, like the sheriff, it's going to be very radical. And so you can expect to begin to see some proposals to change things in a fairly significant way. As I said, it's not so much a problem for planning and development. I've seen a lot worse and made it through it. On the 17th, there were a couple of ag contracts, and just as a reminder, we no longer do non-renewals. We used to take non-renewals to the board with a board letter. Now you just go to the clerk recorder and you record your notice of non-renewal, and that's it. We do all the other ag contracts, the replacements and the new ones, but non-renewals we don't do anymore. We set the hearing for the Eastern Goleta Valley local coastal plan amendment, which has been certified by the Coastal Commission. That's next week, and it will come back to the board for the up or down vote. And I think that we worked a lot with Coastal Commission staff about the actual functionality of their suggested modifications. There were things that they were suggesting that were policies that we could not make findings on. We said we're not disagreeing with you about your thought here, it's just the way it's written, we can't make any findings. And so we worked through a lot of that. There were certain things that we agreed to disagree about. There will be, as there is in the Toro plan, there will be the finding of sort of the takings finding. I can't remember what it's called, but it's already in the Toro plan, so that if you are proposing to, say, for example, reduce a buffer, you basically have to prove that would effectively be a taking in order to be able to do it. So that's one of the more controversial things. Also, no more new coastal bluff stairways, and some people are upset about that, but the reality is that if we were to approve, if we were to reject the local coastal plan certified amendment and then approve a new coastal bluff stairway, they just appeal it and deny it. So I mean, it's basically a done deal. So I think all in all, it's a good package. We worked very well to refine and hone the language. I'm pretty satisfied with it, so I'm hopeful that the board will accept it. The Tahiguas Resource Recovery Project, we set that hearing, but that's now coming. I'm not sure what date that is on. Do you know? You remember? Is it the 14th now? It was going to be on the 7th of November, and it's on the 14th, and so that will be the revised project to move all the buildings out of the coastal zone. The Olson appeal was to be heard, but that's down on Channel Drive. Now that's going to be on the 5th of December. And we did hear Article 10, and that was a very interesting hearing because we were proposing basically two things. We were proposing to put in place a mechanism that would allow people to come to the Planning Commission and determine, then the Planning Commission, based upon the evidence presented, could determine whether or not these operations were actually legal non-conforming. We wanted to have an ability for people to do that, the idea being that if they are legal non-conforming, that would then allow them to apply for the state licenses with the blessing of the county that yes, they are in fact legal. The other piece that we brought forward was an amortization period, because the whole idea of legal non-conforming is somewhat problematic. Ultimately, whatever the board does, whether they allow certain uses or they don't allow certain uses, we want everybody to be operating under the same set of rules. And so we were proposing an amortization period of a year, after which the whole legal non-conforming status would go away. The board decided that they did not want to do the option of a legal non-conforming determination. They didn't like that, but they said that they did like the idea of a amortization period, but because it was all written up together, we needed to bring it back, and that's going to take place on the 14th of November. Let's see. And finally, yesterday was Camp 4, the Camp 4 agreement. I was not there, but I got a report on it this morning, and what I was told, it was a 4-to-1 vote. I think Mr. Adam wasn't entirely satisfied with the terms of the agreement. There was mixed testimony, but quite a lot of people apparently spoke in support. And so there's already a lawsuit. Lucas Ranch has already filed suit, but that agreement was made yesterday. The Golden Inn was appealed, and we do not have a date for that yet. And the last thing that I will report on was something that I had not anticipated doing, but which I did. As you may well be aware, Veneco is in bankruptcy, and they're going to disappear pretty soon here. And the line 96, which was approved by your planning commission several years ago now, is sitting full of oil, 1,700 barrels of oil. They shut it off when the Plains pipeline ruptured, and that oil has been sitting in there since that time, 2.5 years. So what we wanted them to do was to de-inventory the oil, take the oil out, properly clean the pipeline, and then cap it and fill it full of inert substance and leave it in place. Our franchise agreement says that we could insist that it actually be removed, but we wanted that. Veneco at first offered us in July. Well, first of all, they filed for a regular permit in March. Then they filed for bankruptcy in April and said don't work, and the permit was to do the work, to de-inventory the oil. So in April, they filed for bankruptcy and said stop work. And then in July, they said we'll give the county $200,000 to do the work so long as you release us from all liability. And we said, no, that's not such a good idea. And we said, what we will do is we will give you an emergency permit to do the work. And they filed for an emergency permit to simply de-inventory but not properly clean and cap and render inert the pipeline. So we approved the emergency permit while making it clear that we did not think that that was enough, but we approved it. They then tried to walk away from the emergency permit. They basically tried to, quote, withdraw their signature, unquote, which is a very odd concept. So I went to, the bankruptcy hearing was in Wilmington, Delaware. And so I had plans to be on the East Coast shortly thereafter. So I got nominated, and so I went to the hearing. I got deposed for a couple hours at 7 in the morning after arriving at about 7 o'clock the night before. Then the hearing went all day. I was on the stand for about 2 hours or so, and I was it. There were a number of other folks, like the fire marshal, state fire marshal, who would like to have been there, but they weren't. So in the end, the judge said, okay, I'm going to make them do the work that is authorized by the emergency permit, which is to de-inventory using water to purge the line. But that's not really enough. So what that means is that the rest of it falls to the county. So we have to clean it and cap it and fill it full of inert material. And so we're now in the process of scrambling to figure out how to do that. There's a bond of $100,000 that we might be able to use. Ideally, we would love to be able to do it when they're de-inventorying the pipeline, because they're there, there's a bunch of workers there. It's probably about an extra $30,000 of work once they're there, but it remains to be seen how quickly the county can move. Certainly this is not something that we are experts at or really have much experience at all. We permit, we inspect, but actually doing that kind of work is not something that is really in the wheelhouse of the county. But at least we got something, because when the hearing started, the judge wasn't going to let them walk. And Veneco will, in a couple months here, cease to exist. So that's what I have.
Very interesting questions of Dr. Russell. Commissioner Brown.
Yep. Thank you for that interesting report. A question on the amortization and other issues. Is the board, are we going to hear sort of what the other piece, is there any other sort of follow-on? They're just going to do the amortization and they're not going to sort of do the thing that you're an okay thing and you can apply to the state piece, or how's that going to work?
Commissioner Brown, through the chair, the board didn't want to do that, and so,
right.
It remains to be seen how that's going to work. I know that there was Supervisor Williams would like us to do. Actually, thank you for the question. It reminds me of an important piece. Supervisor Williams would like us to, and I think it was made part of the motion, to do planner consults on these operations. And if the operation is in conformance with the as yet unadopted draft ordinance, then we would write a letter to the state so stating. That's an interesting approach. I think it needs a little bit of refinement. Also, I do have one more comment, and that's about ADUs. You're probably aware that the board chose not to act on the ADU ordinances that we brought forward because it was clear that there were some cleanup bills that were going to pass that would basically render whatever it was that they were to adopt that would need to be changed on January 1. And so they said wait, and we anticipated the adoption and signature by the governor of the new ADU laws, which he did, and we started moving right away even before they were signed, and those will be coming back to you, I believe, at that joint hearing? At that joint hearing. So ADUs will be coming back again. The big changes are that the independent districts like Montecito Sanitation and Water will no longer be able to charge, and also we need to fully understand the meaning of the change in wording, but it basically went from allowing ADUs in all residential zones to allowing ADUs in all zones that allow for the construction of single-family or multifamily residences. So that would seemingly include ag zones. Although there is a lot of discussion as to what that means, but that's my current understanding.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioners in the North County, any questions from either of you?
The only question I would have is the likelihood of bringing back the short-term rentals, given the fact that over a 5-year period it could mean as much as $20 million in tax revenue to the county. And then I'd also understand that there's going to be further costs to the county relative to enforcement when they figure out people are going to do it anyway. Has that been scheduled now to go before the board?
Yes and no. Commissioner Blau, as far as bringing back short-term rentals, we would await board direction to do that if the board so desires. We currently have no intention to bring back the short-term rental ordinance except for changes potentially to the area of the coastal overlay in the coastal zone. If people come forward with data that show that historically they had been doing short-term rentals, it's possible that we might expand that overlay. And at that time, the board could potentially take other action. As far as enforcement is concerned, we are going on the 5th of January with enforcement options for short-term rentals, whether it's going to be proactive, reactive, how intense they want the enforcement to be. So that's going on the 5th of December. And also in terms of enforcement, the other significant enforcement issue is going to be cannabis, whether it's allowed in some areas and not in others, or banned completely, whatever may be the case. There's significant enforcement issues. There currently are significant enforcement issues. That will be addressed on the 14th when the CEO brings back an update for the board on cannabis, and Mr. Clemon will be there and will be seeking direction on the nature of enforcement, because clearly we will require more enforcement resources than we currently have. In terms of enforcement on cannabis, there's sort of two kinds of enforcement. One is the permit compliance type of enforcement. That we can charge people for. But the zoning enforcement, we can't. And historically, zoning enforcement has been a cost which is not recovered through any kind of permit fees or fines, even though we do use fines. So that's going to require additional resources. And for short-term rentals, Again, it's the same thing. If you have people who have permits, then permit compliance, we can charge for that. But in terms of, finding the folks that are doing it illegally, or at least attempting to do so, that would require some resources that we don't have. So it will be dependent on whether the board wants us to be proactive or reactive, as we traditionally have been, and whether they want us to put the pedal to the metal, or how intensive they want our enforcement approach to be.
Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, Dr. Russell, the short-term rental is going to the board on the 5th of January, and the cannabis, you said, is the 14th of what month?
That's the next update is November 14th.
Oh, okay, so that's, okay, all right.
And the short-term the short-term rental
December
enforcement is December 5th.
Oh, December, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Blau, anything further?
Nope, that's my comment for the day for that political little brouhaha.
Understood. But just as a question for further clarification, obviously we have some initiatives that are going to be placed in the laps of planning and development for enforcement purposes. And if there's no permit, someone is just conducting an activity in violation of the county's ordinances and is fined at some point, where do those fines go? They go right into the general plan? General fund?
Chair Cooney, the fines come to us, and we then can use them as we would general fund. However, our success in actually getting people to pay fines is mixed at best. And so our recourse is to lien their property. And then someday, when the property changes hands, there is then an opportunity to recover the fine. The property that's coming before you, the development plans of Carl Ranch, that's the ranch that when you're going north has all the white fences all over it. Oh. There was a lot of unpermitted development, including those fences, and we fined them and we liened the property. And several years ago, when the property changed hands, they actually paid the fine. But because of that, our ability to recover fines is less than perfect.
Okay, but if we are successful, there could be some reimbursement of all the effort.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Anything further from Dr. Russell? This is exceptional that you were able to spend so much time with us, and congratulations on your day in Wilmington. It sounds very successful, and obviously we have problems in our future regarding Veneco and its activities.
Thank you very much.
All right. Having finished our administrative agenda, we have 3 items to head forward with. Are we ready to proceed with the initial Southern Cal Gas Advanced Meter project, or do you want a little time to set up? Mr. Wilson.
Chair Kinney, we're ready to proceed.
Okay, perfect. Then let's read that into the record, Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Olivia Gutierrez, agent for the applicant, Southern California Gas Company, to consider case number 17 CUP 3 and 17 CUP 7, and to determine the project is exempt pursuant to sections 15301B, 15303D, and 15304F of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Commissioners, before we start, are there any ex parte declarations anyone wants to make? Commissioner Brown.
I had a brief phone conversation with the applicant. That's it.
Anything from the North County?
Yes, sir. I had also a brief conversation with the applicant, explaining to me where they're removing a bunch of the devices.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Dargill.
Good
Good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Joe Dargle, and I'm a staff planner presenting this project as part of the Development Review Division. The project before you today is a request for a conditional use permit and associated coastal development permit for Southern California Gas Company's Advanced Meter Project. The project was first heard by your Commission on September 27th, where it was continued to today's hearing. At that hearing, your Commission requested that the project return with alternative locations in Gaviota that would be screened from public view. Your Commission also requested that staff determine the applicability of the CEQA exception to the categorical exemptions for the Gaviota Coast locations, as well as provide a presentation showing alternative pole materials. The applicant has since revised their project description to remove each of the Gaviota Coast locations. The revised project would allow the installation of advanced meter data collection units at 3 coastal locations throughout the county. Each of the 3 proposed sites is located within a county public right-of-way. One location would require a new 29-foot wood pole, while 2 of the proposed locations would be attached to existing light poles. Each unit would be comprised of a 4-foot wide antenna boom with 2 2.5-foot tall antennas and a data collection unit cabinet approximately 1.4 cubic feet in size. The location in Summerland requiring a new utility pole would require 1 5.8 square foot solar panel. The proposed site locations are shown on the screen. Sites F and G are proposed in the community of Isla Vista, and Site H is proposed in the Summerland Community Plan area. Site F is located on Stork Road, and Site G is located on Seville Road, both in the community of Isla Vista. Here's an existing and proposed view looking northwest at Site F on Stork Road. As shown, the proposed equipment would be screened from view by existing trees. This view is of Site F looking west. This view is of Site F looking southwest. This proposed location would provide coverage to customers in the areas shown on the map in purple. Here's an existing and proposed view looking west at Site G on Seville Road. This view is of Site G looking south. And this view is of Site G looking east. This proposed location would provide coverage to customers in the areas shown on the map in purple. Site H is located at the top of Calle Culebra in the Summerland Community Plan area. This view at Site H is looking north. The proposed pole would be in line with the existing utility pole to the south and screened from view from Highway 101. This view is of Site H looking east. And this view is of Site H looking west. The coverage footprint map shown above shows the coverage area that would include portions of Summerland and Montecito. The project has been reviewed by the South Board of Architectural Review at 2 separate hearings, at which SBAR requested the project return for preliminary and final review upon approval by the Planning Commission. The Coastal Zoning Ordinance has specific development standards for all telecom projects. Acknowledging that not all telecom facilities can meet these standards, exemptions to the standards are allowed by the Coastal Zoning Ordinance. In order to approve the project as proposed today, the Planning Commission must make the finding for an exemption to one development standard based upon the technical requirements of the equipment. The Article 2 Coastal Zoning Ordinance requires support facilities to be located underground if feasible. Locating the data collection unit cabinets underground is not technically feasible due to the equipment design and contractual requirements. The project is also regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, which sets limits for maximum allowable human exposure to radio frequency emissions. The limits established by the FCC are designed to protect public health with a very large margin of safety. As part of the application, SoCalGas provided radio frequency emissions compliance reports for the 3 sites. Each report was peer-reviewed by a county-approved consultant and found to be sufficient. The maximum radio frequency exposure from the sites would range from 0.29% to 0.49% of the FCC general population limits. As proposed and conditioned, the project would require an exemption to one development standard. With the granting of one exemption, the project would comply with the requirements of the Coastal Zoning Ordinance, the County Comprehensive Plan, the Coastal Land Use Plan, including the Goleta and Summerland Community Plans. The project would comply with federal telecommunications requirements and would be exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, sections 15301, 15303, and 15304. Staff recommends your commission make the required findings for approval, determine the project is exempt from environmental review, and approve the project subject to conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dargill. Do we have questions for staff? Seeing none here. Any questions from Commissioners Blau and Farini?
No, sir, we're good.
Okay, then let's call on the applicant. Anybody here from SoCalGas wanting to address the commission?
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner and members of the commission and our representatives in the North County. Timothy Mahoney, I'm with Southern California Gas Company. Spoke with you earlier on September, and as the staff has pointed out, we have altered and revised our application. So before you today is just the 3 data collection units. This is where we'll have the 2 in Isla Vista, which are co-located on existing streetlight poles, and as you can see from the photo sims, those are pretty well hidden. And then the 1 pole in Summerland, and that is just a freestanding pole, no guidelines, no electricity going to that pole, no wires, just simply pretty much set as it was. So I'd like to thank the staff for their time and direction on this and support the recommendation. Okay. I think that's all. We're here to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from any of the commissioners of Mr. Mahoney? I think your explanation the last time was very complete, and we understood the problem, and I think we zeroed in on our concern about those Gaviota Coast locations. So absent the feasibility of putting these installations underground, I think we're ready to proceed. So commissioners in the north, any questions of Mr. Mahoney?
No, sir, we're ready to support the staff recommendation.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Dargill. Anything to add?
Chair, I have nothing else to add.
All right, then. We have 3 installations, 2 in Isla Vista, 1 in Summerland, as has been explained. We ready for a motion? Commissioner St. John.
I have I have one slight change to the conditions of approval that I did talk with staff about yesterday, and it's just a clarification that it uses pretty much the county's standard reference to a site throughout the conditions that the project, certain things will be done at the site, and since there's 3 of them, I would just like that to have a global change to be at each site.
And that appears at various points in the conditions as opposed to just 1 or 2.
Pretty much throughout.
Okay.
With that, I would be prepared to make a motion.
Why don't you go ahead?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, have we asked for public comment on this item?
We should. we should. Is there any public comment on this matter? We haven't received any speaker slips. In fact, there's a dearth of public comment on this project generally, but that's our job, so we'll move forward with the motion. Commissioner St. John.
I move approval of the staff recommendation dated October 12th, 2017, to include making the required findings for approval of the project specified in the revised findings included as attachment A of this October 12th memo, determine the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines as noted in the staff report, and approve the project subject to the revised conditions of approval included in attachment B of the staff report with the change that I mentioned referring to each site.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Brown. Any further discussion by the commissioners? Anything to add, Commissioners Blau and Farini?
No, sir, we're good.
All right, then we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner
Villalobos.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner St. John.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
And Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you very much. Let's take a brief 5-minute break to set up for item number 2. We're back on the record. This is the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 1st of November, 2017. And we are ready for item number 2, Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following is a hearing on the request of Eric Ackerman, agent for the owners, to consider case number 17 LLA 3 and to determine the project is exempt from the provisions of SEQA pursuant to section 15305 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay. Are there any site visits or other communications to declare on the part of commissioners? Commissioner Blau, Commissioner Farini?
No, sir.
Okay, so then we're ready to proceed. Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Sean Stewart, planner in the Development Review Division. The project before you today is a simple and straightforward lot line adjustment. However, it is before your Commission because you are the decision maker when the lot line adjustment involves parcels in the rural area and when the adjusted lot area exceeds a 10% increase or decrease in the area of the smallest lot. The proposed project site is made up of 2 legal lots of record that contain existing residential development on both lots. Parcel A is located at 1790 Ocean Oaks Road, is 0.59 acres in size, and is zoned 20R1. Parcel B is located at 1825 Cravens Lane, is 9.64 acres in size, and is zoned Ag 110. Both parcels are located in the coastal zone of the Carpinteria area in the 1st Supervisorial District and in an area designated as rural. Both parcels currently receive public services from the Carpinteria Valley Water District, the Carpinteria Summerland Fire Protection District, the Santa Barbara County Fire Sheriff, the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, and each lot has its own private septic system, and Parcel B additionally has its own private well on site. Here, the existing lot line to be adjusted is shown in red. Following the dashed red line, the lot line is now shown in its proposed location, which is 20 feet to the north of its prior location. The purpose of the lot line adjustment is to obviate the need for an existing landscape and drainage easement and would entail a transfer of land measuring 1/10 of an acre. As such, the proposed lot line would result in a proposed Parcel A measuring 0.69 acres and a proposed Parcel B measuring 9.54 acres. Parcel A supports a single-family dwelling, detached garage, utility shed, and greenhouse. The structures were constructed prior to zoning and are therefore non-conforming. However, they do conform with setbacks and would continue to do so following the proposed lot line adjustment. Parcel A is conforming as to parcel size and width, given that it is greater than 20,000 square feet and greater than 100 feet in width. Parcel A would continue to conform to parcel size and width following the proposed lot line adjustment. Parcel B supports a single-family dwelling with an attached garage that was permitted in 1985. The structure does conform with setbacks and would continue to do so following the proposed lot line adjustment. Parcel B is non-conforming as to parcel size, given that it is less than 10 acres, and it would continue to remain non-conforming following the lot line adjustment. The project is exempt from environmental review based upon section 15305 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, which exempts minor lot line adjustments on properties with an average slope of less than 20% and where no new parcels are created. As proposed, the project is consistent with the county comprehensive plan, including the coastal land use plan regarding policies related to services, parcel size, and agricultural land use. Additionally, the project is consistent with the Chapter 21 subdivision regulations governing lot line adjustments, since the project would not result in a greater number of residentially developable parcels than existed prior to the lot line adjustment, or increase the subdivision potential of either of the affected lots. And the project is compliant with the zoning requirements and allowances of Article 2, the Coastal Zoning Ordinance, particularly as they relate to use, setbacks, building separation, parking, and height limits. Therefore, staff recommends your commission make the required findings for approval, determine the project is exempt from CEQA, and conditionally approve the project subject to the conditions of approval. This concludes staff's presentation. I am now available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Stewart? None here. Anything in the north?
No, sir. No questions here.
I don't think we have any right now, but don't go too far. Do we have the applicants here? Anybody would you like to address the commission?
Sure. We just want to thank you for your time, and as Sean indicated, it's a simple, straightforward lot line adjustment, and we look forward to your resolution passing. Thank you.
You are, sir. Sorry.
I'm Eric Ackerman with Gramercy Land Surveying, and the Bill Lord's here present, one of the clients with this lot line adjustment, and I'm the agent of record.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it does appear to me that this is the exception to the normal case where it is truly a minor lot line adjustment and is truly exempt from CEQA review, which is so unusual that it gets to the Planning Commission. But I looked closely and could find no reason to oppose, so I'd welcome a motion or input from any of my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chair, if, unless we hear otherwise from North County, I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right. Anything from Commissioner Blau or Commissioner Farini?
I'll second that motion to have to go forward. The only comment I would make is it surprises me that this can't be handled almost at an administrative level. I mean, I do a number of lot line adjustments for other parcels and other jurisdictions, and typically I could get this across the counter in 6 weeks with just a few signatures from a few people. I get that it exceeds the 5 or 10% number you talked about, but I wonder if our staff that's in the the process enhancement program might not want to look at this. This is one that I think should have been done at a director's level. It shouldn't come to didn't need to come to the Planning Commission, didn't need the expense. I agree with Commissioner Cooney. There's no reason for an environmental review. There's no reason to do anything but approve this. But there's also, in my view, we should maybe take a look at this procedure so that we can streamline ones like these and reduce the cost to our constituency. So that being said, I'm prepared to vote for the approval of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Blau. Mr. Wilson, comment?
Chair, can you just a reminder for public comment?
Yeah, I was going to do that. Thank you.
Haven't gotten there yet. Commissioner Farini? Any comment?
I'm ready to move forward in support of the project.
And Commissioner St. John?
And
okay.
I have no public comment here.
All right. Is there anybody we have overlooked for public comment? Doesn't appear anyone is in our hearing room, or I assume in the North County. Commissioner Farini?
We have no public we have no public in the hearing room. It's just Commissioner Farini and I.
Okay, well, let us know if that changes, and we'll assume. Commissioner Brown.
Okay, then I would like to make the following motion that we make the required findings for approval, including the CEQA findings, determine the project is exempt from CEQA, and approve the project subject to the conditions of approval.
Commissioner
And I'll
Blau.
second that motion.
Commissioner Blau seconds. Any further discussion? Not seeing or hearing any. We're ready for the roll call.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner St. John.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
And Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you very much for your help, and we'll move right directly to item number 3.
The following is a hearing on the request of David Vorbeck, appellant, to consider case number 17 APL 10, appeal filed on June 27, 2017, of the director's decision to approve case number 17 LUP 143 and to determine the project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to sections 15301E1 and 15303E of the state guidelines for the implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. I had a chance to visit the property site a couple of days ago. Are there any other declarations from commissioners in the North County? No one?
No, sir, thank you.
Nothing here. Okay. Ready to move forward then. Ms. Lair, is this your first hearing?
Good morning, Commissioners. No, this is not.
Oh, well, sorry. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Catherine Lair, and I am the case planner for the project on appeal before the Planning Commission today. Today, we are looking at Vorbeck's appeal of the Armstrong Additions, case number 17 APL 10. The appellant has appealed the director's decision to approve the land use permit, case number 17 LUP 143. The project site is located in Mission Canyon Heights at 965 Cheltenham Road and is not visible from Foothill Road. The site hosts an existing 1,075 square foot residence and carport permitted in 1957. The project on appeal before the Commission today is a request for a land use permit to allow the following: a 193.5 gross square foot living room addition, an attached 23 square foot shed, a new 360 square foot patio area, replacement of existing windows and doors, a new 4-foot retaining wall with a 4-foot fence along the western portion of the property boundary, or eastern portion of the property boundary, entry gate and fencing, as well as an inclusion of an as-built carport, and a 2-foot wall located, and removal of a 2-foot wall located along the northern end of the property boundary. Grading will include approximately 40 cubic yards of cut. The director approved the land use permit on July 17th, and it was subsequently appealed at the end of a 10-day appeal period on July 27th. As discussed in the Planning Commission staff report, the SBAR preliminary approval was also appealed by the northern neighbor. The northern neighbor's appeal concerns included the removal of the rear wall, as well as the proposed landscape plantings. This appeal was withdrawn after staff worked to resolve the issues with the northern neighbor and the applicant. The withdrawn appeal will not be heard or acted upon by the Planning Commission. The appellant states that the plans provided for the project are based upon an inaccurate survey, that the project is being built outside the building envelope, and that there are discrepancies provided between the provided survey and architectural drawings. Furthermore, the appellant asserts that it is obvious that the architect used original property lines and setbacks from plans submitted in 1955, irrespective of the current survey. The applicant provided a site plan based upon a survey signed and stamped by a licensed surveyor per county requirements. Staff has found no indication that the project site plan and survey are inaccurate or incorrectly drawn. On August 10th, 2017, staff met with the appellant in person to review the survey and setbacks. Staff confirmed that all setbacks were depicted accurately pursuant to the LUDC. During meeting with staff, the appellant measured the setbacks as well as the distance between the existing storage closet under the carport and the property boundary. Contrary to what was submitted in the statement of appeal, the appellant and staff found no discrepancies after reviewing the plans. As mentioned in the staff report, the storage closet encroaches approximately 5 or so inches into the side setback. Pursuant to the LUDC, a variable setback would allow for a 12-foot long portion of the variable side setback to be reduced from 6 feet to 5 feet and 6 inches. The appellant is aware of the storage cabinet's slight encroachment and has no concerns about this aspect of the project. Prior to submitting the appeal, and again after the appeal was received, staff requested that the appellant provide evidence in support of their claims, such as a single-line survey. To date, staff has received no additional information. There is no reason to believe that the survey provided for this project is inaccurate, and no evidence to support the appellant's assertions. The project went to SBAR on 3 separate occasions and received preliminary approval on July 17th and final approval on July 25th. The project would not need to return to SBAR unless changes are made. As detailed in the Planning Commission staff report, the proposed project meets the development standards of the LUDC for the R1 zone district, including setbacks and building height. The proposed project is consistent with all policies within the comprehensive plan, including the Mission Canyon Community Plan. To conclude, staff recommends that the County Planning Commission deny the appeal, case number 17 APL 10, make the required findings for approval of land use permit, case number 17 LUP 143, included as attachment A, including the CEQA findings, determine that the project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15301E1 and 15303E of CEQA, included as attachment C, and grant de novo approval of land use permit case number 17 LUP 143, subject to the conditions included as attachment B. This concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lair. I do have a question about the fence. You indicated in your presentation that the proposed new fence would be along the eastern side of the property, but in the staff report, I'm looking at the attachment A to the conditions of approval, which indicates a new 4-foot retaining wall with a 4-foot fence along a portion of the western property boundary, which I interpreted to be closest to the appellant's property. So I think we need to clear that up.
Chair Cooney. So as part of the project, there are fencing additions proposed on the western and eastern portions of the property. The eastern portion has a retaining wall as well as a fence, while the western portion just has a 6-foot fence, as you can see right here in the purple.
Okay. Is there any indication of the construction materials to be used in either of the fences?
Chair Cooney, yes, it is part of the plans provided in the staff report. The fencing would be wood.
Wood, unspecified
Wood.
as to design or anything like that.
The SBAR reviewed the details, and they should be included in the site plans provided.
Well, I couldn't make it out. Of course, I didn't have a copy of the plans, but in one of the attachments, we had a site plan, but nothing about that. In the comments of the SBAR, the most recent meeting, July 17th, there also is an indication in the description that it's an 8-foot retaining wall along the western boundary. And in the comments of the SBAR, their minutes, there's an indication screen wall along west side of house is too tall at 8 feet, reduce height to 6. But there isn't a retaining wall on the west side, is there? Are they talking about the
Chair
east side
Cooney,
fence?
that is correct. They're speaking of the west side fence, and that is 6 feet. The fence with the retaining wall is on the east side, and the retaining wall is only 4 feet with an additional fencing on the top.
Of 4 feet.
4-foot retaining wall with
So-
4-foot fencing.
On the eastern side, then, the construction would total 8 feet in height.
That is correct.
Okay, and is that in compliance with our ordinances for boundary line fences?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Question, Commissioner Brown.
So the S-bar minutes are they accurate or not about the screen wall along west side of house at 8 feet? Is that, they say reduce it to 6, so I'm somewhat confused based upon what your discussion with Commissioner Cooney.
Could you please clarify?
Well, it says screen wall along west side of house is too tall at 8 feet. So is it proposed to be at 6 feet?
The screen wall along the west side of the house has been reduced to 6 feet.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Is there a retaining wall part of the construction on the west portion as the project description before the S-bar describes, or is it just a fence?
The wall, Chair Cooney, the wall along the west side is just a fence. Sorry, it's not a wall. The fence along the west side is 6 feet in height and is just a fence. The fencing along the east side includes a 4-foot retaining wall and a 4-foot fence on top of that retaining wall.
Okay, so when we get to it, we'll make some changes in the staff report, which describes otherwise.
This
okay,
can
so we get
clarify,
it
yes.
straight. Any questions from Commissioners Blauer, Farini?
No questions here.
Okay. Commissioner St. John has none. All right. Are you the appellant, sir? Is the appellant here? All right. Are the applicants here? You're here. All right. You are, sir? I'm Brooke Armstrong. All right. Why don't you approach the podium there, and we'll have you testify from there. Mr. Armstrong, welcome.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments for the commission, or do you just want to answer questions?
I pretty much answer questions here to make sure it goes smoothly. If there's anything I can clear up, happy to do that.
Well, you heard my confusion about the size of the fence facing your neighbor, the appellant, which appears to be 6 feet, and you can verify that for us.
That was one thing I could help clear up. That fence closest on the property line is an 8-foot fence. The last review we went to that asked for the screen fence to be reduced to 6 foot is the more interior screen fence that borders the house, and that one they thought should go down to 6 feet, and we made that change.
I'm sorry, can you pull the mic a little bit closer to you? Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a little pointer there, if you wouldn't mind just pointing at the diagram, the one that's 8 feet for us.
Yeah, this is the property line fence, just this portion. And that is 8 feet. The one that the commission that we went to last time recommended reducing to 6 feet is the screen fence that screens the property or the house from the view. And this one has been reduced to 6 feet.
Okay.
Separate issues.
I understand, but I didn't understand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
So appreciate. Now, where's the retaining wall of 4 feet and the fence of 4 feet?
That's this red section on the east side.
And the third question I have is with regard to the boundary line fence on the west. That's 8 feet only, wood construction, no retaining wall?
That is correct. No retaining wall. Wood for the slats and majority of it. There may be metal posts, but yeah, the majority of it is a wood fence. No
It's a
retaining
wood
wall.
fence, right. Okay, well, we have a little bit of ambiguity in our report, but we appreciate you clarifying that for us. Anything else of Mr. Armstrong? Commissioner
Yeah,
Brown?
so the fence on the western property edge, this is existing or it's
Proposed.
proposed? So the BAR they reviewed this fence?
They were totally fine with that fence.
They were totally fine. Okay, so we don't see that in their minutes, do we?
No.
It's not in the minutes. Okay, so it's this fence they wanted to reduce.
And we're
this
happy to do that.
Okay. And this fence is of concern to the appellant?
Apparently.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
All right, you understand, Mr. Armstrong, our job here today is not only to deal with the appeal, but to act as the approver in the first instance of your project. So this is why we're digging a little bit into the detail of it. When I visited the property, looking up from Cheltenham, there's a large telephone pole right in the middle of the driveway. Has that been there the entire time that you've owned the property?
Yes.
Okay, so when you come down the driveway, you go one way or the other. It looks like you get your choice, but there's no clear direction.
Technically, the east side of the wide driveway is my neighbor's, or the west side is my neighbor's. The east side is mine. We haven't moved in there, so I'm yet to establish any sort of regular pattern. I guess I'm unsure how to answer that. There's
nothing wrong with it. It's just an unusual feature to have a telephone pole in the middle of your driveway.
I mean,
like
if I could talk with the neighbor. If we were friendly, which I would hope to be, maybe, if I was to want to turn right out of the driveway, you go to the right of the pole. But I suppose that would have to be by permission if it's on his side. The only place where there is a mutual easement is that kind of trapezoidal shape up at the top of the driveway where we can both turn around.
Would you point that out for me?
Sure. This line kind of down here. So this shape in here is is a mutual easement, so I can back up into his side to turn my car around and go down the driveway, and he can back up into this side to go down his side of the driveway.
Okay, and as a practical matter, the driveway is wide enough so that you can stay on your half and he can stay on his without a mutual easement?
Yeah, you could. I mean, again, I think in practice in the past between friendly neighbors, they've gone down the middle and gone down either side, but if we had a problem, you could totally put a fence down the middle and have enough room for a normal car.
Okay, well, I don't think you want to waste room with a fence, but
No, I mean, hopefully
it might be good to straighten it out legally at some point and get an easement so that you're not in violation if you stray a foot over onto his property.
Yeah, that is a question of mine, is because, well, right now, currently, he has parked a work truck kind of straddling the property line, the top, kind of in this spot in between carports. And I've asked him to move the truck, but I need to figure out my next recourse so I can have that, my property back to use.
Okay, well, I think you've answered all our questions, and so we'll bring it back to staff and make a decision. Thank you. Ms. Lair.
Chair Cooney, I would like to include for the record the project was properly noticed and the appellant should have received notice of today's hearing.
Okay, well, we won't draw any inferences from his failure to appear, but I think we're ready to proceed without the appellant's presence. He always has a remedy if he wants to seek another hearing and has some good cause to explain his absence today. Any objection from my fellow commissioners to proceeding with our decision today on the appeal?
None in North County.
All right, well, my view is that even if the appellant had appeared, there does not in the record appear any evidence that the survey was done inappropriately or was inaccurate or otherwise to agree with the appeal. So I'd be inclined to move forward with the action proposed by staff, subject to the desire to clarify the description of the fencing in accordance with the testimony of Mr. Armstrong, so we get that right, and I can point out to staff after the meeting exactly where I think there's some ambiguity. Commissioner Brown.
Hopefully that would include the location of this 4-foot retaining wall and the 4-foot fence, which is not on the western property line, which is in the conditions.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure it's clear. Thank you.
All right, are we ready for a motion? Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to move staff's recommendation to deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval of the land use permit, included as attachment A, determine the project is exempt from the provisions of SEQA, grant de novo approval of land use permit, subject to conditions included as attachment B with the changes. And
do we have a second? Commissioner St. John, seconds?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I see no one here for public comment. I don't know if that's Mr. Wilson's signaling over here.
Oh, yes. Good for you. I'm misled by the absence of anyone in the audience not to ask, but I will. It doesn't appear we have any public comment here, and we'll assume that no one is in Santa Maria, so we've asked for public comment on all of our items today. And we're ready to move forward with the vote.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner St. John.
Aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Sorry for the trouble. Mr. Wilson, anything further for the Planning Commission today?
Chair Cooney, we don't have anything else. Thank you.
All right. We look forward to seeing you next week then in Santa Maria. Today's meeting is adjourned.